Who the hell are you?
What are you?
What the is this?
Movie.
Guy.
Thanks for tuning in, people. This is episode 1 of the Movie TV Guy podcast. So we're going to get started real quick. We're going to dive right into some topics. We're going to talk about some entertainment. So, first and foremost, in the last week, the Rambo Last Blood trailer came out, and I'm still not sure how I feel about that name. It's either really good or truly awful. What I did like is First Blood is a movie that one of the best things about it is all the incredible traps that you see. And you see in Last Blood that it does go back to the roots of the traps a little bit, but there was so much more mystery about John Rambo back then. Whereas now, he is the narrator throughout the trailer, which just seems very strange for this guy who was silent for so long. I don't know how that's going to be. I'm probably going to end up seeing it, but it just looks a little bit strange, and it diminished the trailer for me a little bit when I heard, Old Town Road by Lil Nas X come on, because it's just not really the vibe that you expect from what is truly the epitome of an 80s franchise and this 80s action star. There was a clip for Child's Play that came out as well, so it's interesting. You get to see a little bit of the new voice and the new feel from this movie. With Mark Hamill is the voice of Chucky, and you can really feel the difference when you're watching this clip. I can't judge if it's good or bad yet. It's very odd to go from Brad Dourif's screaming Chucky to Mark Hamill's ASMR style Chucky, who still threatening, but it's just weird to have that whisper going on. I'm definitely going to see this one. It's interesting. They've had a really cool promotional thing where they've been doing these posters because they come out the same weekend as Toy Story 4. And it looks like Chucky is killing the Toy Story characters in the posters. It seems interesting enough that it's definitely worth seeing and worth seeing what they do with the franchise, because it's gone all over the place. A lot of people would say that it's been very strange since you got into the territory of Seed of Chucky and Bride of Chucky, where you've got Jennifer Tilly playing herself and Method Man and just a lot of weirdness going on in that movie. Next, it seems SpongeBob SquarePants is going to get a prequel series called Camp Coral. Now, as somebody who grew up right in the age of SpongeBob, maybe a little bit older, it's odd to me because you just had Steven Hillenburg passed away in November. The series you would think would start to maybe go downwards, not keep rising. They're still planning on making another movie. They are doing 13 episodes of this show, which begins production in June, and this is going to be all CG. So it just seems like it's going to be an odd-looking prequel thing that looks like it's a more advanced animation style, and I just feel like whenever you do that, it comes off looking odd. It's one of the reasons I always felt odd about the prequel Star Wars movies have these ships and this technology in it that look more advanced than the ones that came out in the 70s but are supposed to be set in the future of that timeline. So it's just always something that threw me off, and it just seems odd to do this now, but hey, I get it if you're Nickelodeon. SpongeBob has been a cash cow, and they want to milk it for all it's got. So now, in the opposite kind of news, instead of shows coming on, let's talk about some shows going off. First of all, Netflix canceled The Ranch, and that is the show that, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, I'm sure Netflix has pushed it to your front page at some point. It's got Ashton Kutcher, Danny Masterson, Sam Elliott was in it. What I didn't know about this show is somehow it managed to get to 4 seasons, which I think is pretty incredible for a show that I don't think I ever met a single person who watched an episode of the show. Sorry if you are a star of The Ranch. Sorry if Ashton Kutcher is somehow watching this. But that was not the only show that's canceled. Amazon has also joined the cancellation game. Sneaky Pete, which I heard was really good, is the show that has Bryan Cranston and Giovanni Ribisi. I hadn't seen any of it, but I know they had done 3 seasons of the show, and I remember hearing after season 1 that it was a really good show, that it was fun to watch, that it had this incredible timing. Unfortunately, the timing is no more for Sneaky Pete. This will be the end of Sneaky Pete. And also, the other big cancellations were over on the Sci-Fi Channel. They got rid of Deadly Class, which, to be honest with you, I never heard of, and Happy, which is a shame because I'd watched the first season of Happy because I was a big fan of Christopher Maloney. I really feel like Law & Order SVU went down as soon as this guy was gone. And it seemed like it was an interesting semi-continuation of his character. I know it's based on a comic book series, but it looked like a Stabler that if Kathy had ever actually left Stabler and his kids were gone and Stabler just went totally off the rails, Stabler could have become this guy, this hitman Nick Sachs. It was always interesting. It felt like it straddled the lines of drama and comedy pretty well, but I don't know anybody else who watched it, and I get, when if it was on a streaming service, I could understand maybe they could have kept it around. But Sci-Fi, a cable network, they need that ad money, and if you don't have eyes, people aren't gonna pay for ads for the show. So unfortunately, that is the end of Happy. In the film world, first of all, Warner Brothers announced that they are not going to be at Hall H. They're not going to be at San Diego Comic-Con this year, which is always a shame because I'm sure that they had some stuff that they could announce. But instead, we got just a tiny little announcement instead from Patty Jenkins on Twitter, who first announced that WB isn't going to be at Hall H. But she shared this picture, and I'm not sure if it's supposed to be an actual costume or if it's just supposed to be take note of the aesthetic, but it's like this rainbow prism collage looking thing with Wonder Woman in this golden outfit, and it does look interesting. I'm very interested in seeing that movie because the first Wonder Woman was good until, that third act isn't to the same quality as the rest of the movie with the fight with Ares. But to see Wonder Woman in the 80s taking on Cheetah, who's going to be played by Kristen Wiig, which is just really interesting casting, because I feel like I've never seen her in a action-y role like that. So yeah, that's the news that we got from Wonder Woman 1984, which still set to hit theaters about a year from now, June 5th, 2020. But that's really all the news we got so far. You gotta figure there's gotta be a trailer coming fairly soon. I don't know how soon, but fairly. Next up, not quite TV, not quite film, we got a streaming service bit of news. Swamp Thing was canceled after only having its first episode air on the DC Universe app. And it's just so strange to plan and do this whole show just to cancel it after the first episode airs. And I saw the trailer for this. I haven't watched a single DC Universe show. I don't have the app. But it seemed like an interesting show, and it seemed like pretty good effects. And I had heard that, and I'm not seeing this reported in a lot of places, they were getting a fairly sizable tax credit where they had filmed it. I can't remember if it was, I think it was Missouri. And they were expecting like a $40 million tax credit, which would have been, I think, half the budget of season 1. And it turns out that Missouri did not provide that big a tax credit. It turned out that their tax credit was something along the lines of $14 million, which obviously, if you think you're paying 40 out of $80 million, and then you have to add on another $26 million, that's a pretty sizable thing for a pretty new streaming service and a show with an IP that I'm not sure if there's a lot of massive Swamp Thing fans out there, but I don't know them. Unfortunately for Swamp Thing, that will be the end. They will continue to air the rest of the episodes. I think there are 9 more episodes, but if you were a fan of the first one, sorry to say you won't be getting more of that. Did you hear about this? I saw recently David Spade is getting a new late night show called Lights Out, which is going to be on Comedy Central. It's going to be after The Daily Show, taking the old spot of The Colbert Report and Larry Wilmore's Nightly Show and that show from Jordan Klepper. And it just seems, I know they keep trying to throw something in there, but I don't know who was clamoring for another late night show, and especially one from David Spade. It's nothing personal against David Spade. I just don't see this thing lasting a long time. I expect this to be canceled within the first 6 months of it. You just have too many talented and well-done late-night shows right now. I know that, I think it was E! Had just tried to do a late-night show with Busy Phillips, and that got canceled not too long after it started. But you've got so many. You've got the Samantha Bee's show, you've got your NBC and CBS shows with, Fallon and Colbert and Corden and Myers, and you've got Jimmy Kimmel, and there's just too many of these shows already. It's really a saturated thing, so unless you're going to kind of flip the styling on its head and do something new with that, I really don't think that people are going to be clamoring to go to another one. And I don't know if David Spade is supposed to make it more appealing. I just don't think that it's going to get it done. In another new spot, Lisa Vanderpump is quitting The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. And I only say this because I had no idea what the show Vanderpump Rules is, but apparently that's her show. So she's quitting Real Housewives to jump more into the Vanderpump Rules. For fans of Vanderpump Rules, I hope you enjoy it, but you're on your own on that one. In other news relating to films of the weekend, Dark Phoenix is coming out, and Famke Janssen spoke out. You know Famke Janssen from Taken, and the person who played Jean Grey in the original X-Men movies, spoke out about Dark Phoenix, and she said, "I'm just happy that Dark Phoenix got her own movie because she deserves it, and it's a really powerful and very important story in the comics. That in The Last Stand, we just touched upon the tiniest part of it. It was something that needed to be told as a full-blown film, and now that's happening, and it's wonderful." It's not that wonderful. Apparently all the critics are saying, don't go and see this one. It is pretty much a whimpering end to the Fox version of the X-Men franchise. So we'll see what Marvel does, how they introduce that into the movie. I know that you've got in Spider-Man Far From Home, you're going to start having multiple realities being ripped open by the snaps. So maybe that is a way for them to introduce the X-Men into there. I feel like they just kept pushing the Phoenix Saga in almost all of the movies that they've done. In X-Men The Last Stand, in X-Men Apocalypse, in this one. That's 3 movies out of, around 8 movies where you've got little pieces of the Phoenix Saga and storyline spit in there. And it works in the comic book because you've got so many issues for this thing to be told. But over a 2-hour movie, they just don't seem to be able to get it to work. I'm thinking I'm going to skip it. The reviews have been terrible. The other movie coming out this weekend that I think I'm also going to skip is Secret Life of Pets 2. Might end up seeing it. I was a fan of the first one because it was, it was okay and it was cute, and it never really fully delivered on the premise where you really expected it to be just about pets in the home when owners are away, that kind of thing. Instead, it became more of, your wacky pet leaves the home and we got to get him back hijinks type of thing. Obviously, the movie got rid of its star of the first one, Louis C.K., and it seems to be pushing some of the supporting cast from the first one to the front. I know Kevin Hart seems to have an even bigger role in this one. Patton Oswalt is replacing Louis C.K., so that seems like it could be pretty interesting. I'm a big fan of Patton Oswalt, especially he's got some free time now that Happy's been canceled, and I believe AP Bio was canceled too, and that was another one of his shows. Hopefully we see him working more. He's very funny, and I would love to see him do something that's more his voice, and less of where he's just really subbing in. Hopefully it's got more of his own humor to it than just a Louis C.K. replacement. And finally, I figured I'd talk about Godzilla, King of the Monsters. Now, I went to see this one last week, and I was a fan of the movie. I was a fan of the effects were really good. They do the classic move of King Ghidorah, who's referred to as Monster Zero throughout a lot of the movie. So, for some reason, they never explain it. No matter where he goes, he brings a hurricane with him. So, unfortunately, a lot of the action is shrouded in darkness, which is a bit disappointing because the stuff looks like it could have held up regardless of that. It does a good job mixing monster fights with the human characters that you will not really care about. I don't want to spoil anything too major. You've got really 3 human characters that are stars of the film: Kyle Chandler, Vera Farmiga, and Millie Bobby Brown. I don't think that's a spoiler if you saw the trailers for this movie. What is a spoiler is where they fall upon sides-wise. So I won't get into that. But you've got some really incredible stuff when Godzilla is in it. You've got some really incredible stuff with Rodan, with Mothra. Charles Dance is not in the movie for a lot, but when he is in the movie, this guy is just really incredible to watch. He was Tywin Lannister for years on Game of Thrones, and he's honestly one of the most interesting parts of the movie. Him and Ken Watanabe seem really to be, they know what movie they're in, and they're playing it very seriously and also with a little bit of cheesiness that is detectable if you're looking for it. Kyle Chandler is playing this as a total B movie, so he's still fun to watch too. He is just doing a ton of yelling. There's a moment in the movie where there's an explosion and he gets catapulted across into a wall, and it just looks ridiculous. And if you're here for monster fights and, to really just laugh at the human parts, you really do have a good opportunity to do that. The monster fights are really interesting when you see them out there, and there's a segment when Rodan first comes out of the volcano, and Rodan is chasing after the pilots, and it's really, this to me was the best segment of the movie. It's one of the few times in the movie, too, where they do a good job with the 2014 Godzilla. Did such a good job of when Godzilla is on screen, you really feel how big a monster he is. Every time you're seeing the shots, you can almost never see the full size of Godzilla because he's just too big that he takes up so much of the screen. And that's really one of the things that Gareth Edwards, who directed that, is really good with. From his first movie, Monsters, to Rogue One, you really get to see that a lot. In this one, I think so much of the time it almost feels video game-esque at points where you've got, Godzilla on one side and another kaiju or another monster on the other side, and they're going to run at each other and fight, and it looks good, but you really don't get that sense of scale as much as you do in the 2014 one. Except during that Rodan scene where you've got him just flying overhead at times, and you can see the people on the ground a little bit, and you can see that just the gust of wind from Rodan flying is sending people and cars flying. And that was a really incredible sequence. There's also just a great moment that made me crack up in the theater where, Rodan is just flapping his wings and it's destroying planes. And I guess attempting to help, they say to eject to one of the pilots, and the pilot ejects, and we get this great shot of the camera following the pilot as he ejects directly into Rodan's mouth. And it really just seems like he would have been better off had he not even ejected at all. He would have been better off dying in a plane crash than being eaten by Rodan. Maybe I'm wrong. I think I'd rather go out being in the plane that went down than being eaten by the monster. Anyway, Godzilla King of the Monsters brings in about $48 million over its debut weekend. I think that's not as much as they had wanted. Something like $130 million if you're thinking about it globally. And I think that's pretty good, but this movie had a pretty big budget. You can tell. I mean, it's one of those movies where a city gets absolutely destroyed. You've got these big CG effects. And really, what it's doing is this is all just set up for, you hear Skull Island mentioned several times. And it's really just set up for Godzilla vs. Kong, which I believe is coming in 2020. I don't know what story they're going to set up around Godzilla vs. Kong. It really reminds me of like a Batman v Superman type of thing, where I feel like you're going to get to see Godzilla and Kong fight, but in the end they're going to end up teaming up to defeat a different kaiju. Maybe one of the skull crawlers from Kong Skull Island, or maybe another King Ghidorah type of kaiju who is trying to be the new alpha. We don't know much about the movie right now. We know that it's called Godzilla vs. Kong. We know that it's going to come out in 2020. And I see that returning, there's a couple of actors who come back, like Ziyi Zhang. I don't remember her character's name, but she was in King of the Monsters as one of the scientists. You've also got Millie Bobby Brown and Kyle Chandler returning in the same roles that they played in King of the Monsters. So that I'm still excited for. I'll still go see that on its opening weekend. I can tell you that if you haven't seen King of the Monsters yet, I would recommend it. I wouldn't say, don't go expecting to take that much away from the human characters, but I guarantee that if you do like movies like this, if you like that kind of special effects, the creature feature, Pacific Rim, or Kong Skull Island, or Godzilla 2014, if you liked any one of those, you will definitely get a kick out of the monster fights in this movie. The visual effects really just blew me away the whole time that I was watching it. So I would say check it out if you're not interested in Dark Phoenix or Secret Life of Pets 2 this weekend. I would say go see Godzilla King of the Monsters. And if you have kids, and honestly, I could see plenty of kids who would want to see this over Secret Life of Pets 2, to be honest with you, because there's nothing in this that would be totally terrible for a child to see. There's no blood. I believe it's a PG-13 rating. And I think any kid over the age of 10 would be fine with, just seeing a bunch of monsters fight. They're not going to imitate anything from that. And you know what, if they do, get them a Godzilla toy and they'll imitate it. Who cares? It's time for our second segment of the show. I like to take this time to recommend a YouTube channel that I think people should check out. If you're a movie fan, I always like to recommend one that has at least under 1 million subscribers, just because some of the channels that are already big don't need a recommendation from me. You'll probably have heard of them already. The first channel I'll recommend is Ryan Hollinger. He does these really interesting videos every week or two, and they're usually horror related, so you have to be a horror fan if you're really going to check out his channel. But even if you're just a fan of film essays in general, you'll find interest here. I think that he is an incredible content creator, and I really think it's worth checking out. Ryan's channel's got great videos about content you've probably heard of if you're around the same age as me. Courage the Cowardly Dog, Goosebumps, Are You Afraid of the Dark, Halloween, and he does some stuff that's about non-horror too. You got The Cable Guy, The Mask, Die Hard, but where he really shines is when he talks about stuff that you never even heard of. He talked about a game that I never heard of in my life called I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, and it truly blew me away. It seems really interesting. He manages to make stuff that I would never find interesting. Also, he's got a great accent, so if you're a fan of the foreign accent, I believe he's Irish? So check him out, enjoy his channel, and thank you for watching. we are going to wrap up now the first episode of the Movie TV Guy podcast. Thanks for tuning in.